Hello and welcome to the first episode of Tech News Dump. So this is going to be a weekly roundup of everything that's happened in the current week and just anything technology related for news. First off, I'm going to start with Apple. It's been a huge week for them. They had their WWDC event, so they just released a bunch of information. First off, I want to start off, they talked about they've got now improvements with iOS, increasing the sort of speed of it based on the apps. The apps are now smaller, and they're saying the updates are going to be smaller, up to 50 to 60%. I don't know how they did that. I don't know what that means, but we'll see how that plays out in the future. One thing they're really pushing is their new dark mode, which I think is fantastic for iOS users, because dark mode on Android, I've had it for a long time, and I absolutely love having dark mode and everything. So that's kind of a big one that has been a long awaited. This week's going to have a lot of Apple stuff just because they released all this stuff at once, so don't hate me if it's just a bunch of Apple stuff. I'm not an Apple fanboy. I'm also not an Apple hater. I'm kind of indifferent because I've got an iMac or a Mac Mini for my video editing and for general browsing and that sort of stuff. But then I have an Android phone and also a Windows gaming PC as well. So I'm kind of in between. Next thing I want to talk about is they had a big update for Apple Maps. They're trying to make it actually good, like Google Maps is or Waze. They're increasing sort of its speed, its ability to navigate, and they're also added in their version of pretty much Street View. They call it Look Around. So basically they're just going around doing the same thing Google's been doing with Street View for years. Another big thing that just came out of this event is Apple's sign-in. So now you can sign in to anything using your Apple ID. Kind of like how you've got options to sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, which has been around for a while. This is kind of big for people who are huge into sort of their own personal information safety, because it is Apple. You are paying a premium for that added security and sort of how they don't budge, they don't sell your data to other companies like Google and Facebook have had a history of doing, which may be a big deal to some people. Some people might be really into the fact they can now sign in with that. Other people may not care. Only time will tell and see if that's actually used a lot. Another big thing that came out of this is updates to Siri. So Siri can now play thousands of radio stations with you have the Apple speaker, which a lot of people do, or if you have Apple CarPlay, which more people do, and I think is actually a great sort of software that Apple puts out is their Apple CarPlay stuff. So there's been a major update to that, more than just the Siri being able to do more voice commands. There also are a lot more things it'll do. They also have now the new Apple dashboard, which is kind of a big deal because it actually makes it a lot more user-friendly and actually useful to have in your car instead of just whatever came on your car. And then finally, one of the bigger things that came out of this, or in my opinion the biggest, is the new Mac Pro. And I think it is about time that Apple finally reintroduced a new Mac Pro. It's been a long time coming, and the old one was just so out of date and so terrible, and they were still trying to sell that to people, which I think was almost insulting to their customers, but they finally released a new one. So this is big for professionals. I want to get this out of the way right away. This and the screen that also came out with it are not meant for your average person. These are ridiculously expensive pieces of hardware. They are huge pieces of hardware. They are very specialized and very precise. That is something that your average consumer is not going to need. So people complaining about, if you're going to have to ask about how much it costs, don't even ask. You can't afford it because they are overpriced. Not overpriced, but priced according to the professional hardware is. So the big thing is I'm actually very excited about this. I'm never going to own one of these. There's no reason for me to ever own one of these in my line of work and what I do. But this is big for people who are into it because it's now modular, which people have been asking for that for a long time. The old cheese grater Mac Pro was modular, and that was a huge thing people wanted to bring back after the next generation trash can design. So it's way more modular compared to any other Mac. It's got a huge amount of sort of space on the interior and sort of common slots. You could have up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM with 12 DIMM slots. I don't know why anybody would ever need that, even in professional work, but you can do that. That's something you couldn't do in the past, is upgrade your RAM easily. There's some iMacs that you could do it, but it wasn't easy to do. They also have normal PCIe slots, which is something we haven't seen in a long time. So there's 8 PCIe slots total, which is huge. Apple has it preloaded with, or not preloaded, but you can get AMD graphics cards, they have this new card that's sort of a dual chip design. So you've got basically two AMD Vega 7s, I believe it is, on one card, and you could have two of those. So that's four total, 128 gigs of RAM for your video cards. So that's going to be extremely powerful. Theoretically, you could put any AMD card in this when you buy it, and any multiple of them. NVIDIA, you can't, I don't believe at the moment. I don't think Apple OS supports NVIDIA. If they did, that'd be fantastic. And this would be a definite buy for anybody who's in professional work. But we'll see if they eventually allow NVIDIA cards to be used in it pretty much by just supporting them. So it also has special cards for special workflows. They have a card that makes it super easy for importing and using 8K and 6K and 12K footage, which is great for anybody who does in video work. Some of the big YouTubers out there might like this. Any kind of movie studio is going to love this, obviously. And then apparently cooling is actually good for once in this. We'll see how it is when it comes out. There's no fans directly on any of the components, but the cooling is supposed to be actually functional, unlike most other things Apple has released in an extremely long time. Lastly, I want to talk about their new monitor. It is a 6K monitor. It is huge. It's $5,000. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's $5,000 for the monitor without a stand. The stand is an extra $1,000. People are going crazy about, oh my God, the stand's $1,000. Well, I mean, yes, but if you look at other monitors that are sort of meant for professional color grading or reference monitors, they can go up to 20 grand easy. I've seen some as high as 40 grand. This doesn't have all the features of some of those, but it's still got a lot of them. I mean, so it's expensive, yes, but relatively speaking to other professional stuff like this, it's not super overpriced and out there. The stand's obviously a little bit expensive, but you don't need to use their stand. It's an optional thing. So I don't think this is going to sell very well, obviously, either of these two, the monitor or the computer itself, but it's not meant to. It's meant for professionals who are going to buy something that's ridiculously expensive and just use it for their professional work. I mean, it's very specialized with 6K, 1,000,001 contrast, and then 10-bit color, and your average person isn't going to notice a difference or need that sort of monitor. But somebody who does this for a living obviously will. And then, so that wraps it up for the Apple. Now I want to move on to Google's Stadia announcements. So something we've known has been coming for a long time. We've heard the rumors that Google's going to be doing its own sort of game streaming thing, but they finally released it. It is Google Stadia. This is an interesting one because it's not exactly how I expected it to be, or I think a lot of people expected it to be. It's going to be $9.99 a month for 4K, 60 FPS, HDR game streaming, which really isn't that bad of a deal when you think about it. Some people are saying, oh, $10 is too high considering you don't get a whole lot of games with that. There's going to be some free games, but I mean, an Xbox One X, which is I think the next cheapest way to get 4K 60 FPS, is almost, I mean, I think you can get them sometimes at Costco for like $4.25, $4.30, $4.50. I got mine for $3.99 on Black Friday, but that was an extremely good deal, which I haven't really seen around that often. But yeah, so it's a lot cheaper than that, and it's also a per month thing, so it helps it out where you don't have to have all that money up front. So Google put in a lot of money to get this to where it is. Apparently, they're doing a lot of custom chips. They're putting in servers everywhere for it, so we'll see how good it is when it actually comes out. But I mean, if you're not really into the super high quality gaming, you're more of like an esports gamer, you want higher FPS. So I wish they would have, if you got the Pro for $10 a month, they would have offered maybe 1080p for 120 FPS as an option instead. I know this would be a lot harder for it to run from a server, but it's probably possible in the future if it's something for them to look into. And if you've got a monitor that can handle 120 FPS or 120 hertz, you're gonna have a gaming PC most likely, so I get why they didn't do that at first, but I think it'd be an interesting thing for them to experiment with and give people the option to do. So the Founders Edition, which is gonna be, if you wanna use that this year, you have to get the Founders Edition pretty much, it's gonna be $129. And that's not that bad of a price / a bad deal for somebody who has like nothing with gaming. They don't have any controllers, they don't have a system yet, and they just wanna get into it at a higher frame rate, because you do get one of the Stadia controllers with it. You get a Chromecast Ultra, which can handle it, you could cast it to that and do the streaming through there. And you get 3 months of Stadia Pro for free, or not for free, but included. And you get 3 months to give to somebody else, which obviously they're just trying to get more people to try to use it. So there will also be a free version apparently coming, or a free tier of it coming in 2020. We'll see when that actually ends up coming out. They haven't said the exact dates yet, but it's going to be 1080p at 60 FPS, which isn't bad. That's like a normal Xbox One or like a PS4. I mean, that's the resolution and the speed. We'll see how good it actually looks. With any of these options, you're going to have to buy pretty much all the games. They've been saying that I think Destiny 2 is going to be included for free, but that's already going to be a free game. So you're gonna have to buy the games. I think a lot of people are looking for it to be a Netflix sort of thing where you stream it like that, kind of like the way Xbox has got theirs set up. So, I mean, I think it would be a good idea for them to sort of do maybe a $20 a month version where you get 1080p, but all the games are included, and you have a huge library to choose from. So this is obviously going to be more geared towards single-player games that aren't competitive, because there's going to be some sort of latency lag that you aren't going to get with having the console in your living room at your house, obviously. But I mean, I think this is still could be a great option for the 1080p 60 FPS. That's free. You just got to buy the games. If you already have an Xbox controller and a cheap laptop, you can game pretty much anywhere at that. So this is good for somebody maybe who travels a lot. But they don't want to spend a whole lot of money on games. So you use one of their Xbox controllers, a laptop with a LAN port, and now you can go around and game pretty much anywhere that has a decent internet connection. And it's actually not going to be apparently too hard to run. They're saying 10 megabits per second is a minimum for 720p 60 FPS stereo sound, and then 20 megabytes per second is going to be the minimum for 1080p 60 FPS with 5.1 surround sound. And finally, if you want 4K 60 HDR with 5.1 surround sound, you're going to need 35 megabits per second, which isn't outrageous at all. That is easily doable, even on non-fiber internet. It's just the big thing is going to be the ping, which is why I think going above and beyond that with a good fiber connection, which will give you a low ping, is going to be key for making this work well for somebody who wants to do it. I mean, most hotels easily have 35 megabit per second LAN internet. That's super common. So I think this would be really good for somebody who travels a lot. But I have high hopes for this. I think this is an interesting concept. It's probably not for me, and it's not for everybody, obviously, but not all gaming is. But I think there's definitely a market out there for this. As long as they do it right, they've got good server connections, it does everything they say it's going to do at the internet speeds it's going to do, and as long as there is a low latency in this, there's not a huge amount of lag, I think it's going to be a really good product. We'll see how this evolves over time, what kind of games looks like, what the library looks like. Is it going to be PC games? Are they going to try and get exclusives on here? Is it going to be the same sort of ones you get on console, or only older games? We'll see how it is when it's actually released. It hasn't been yet, and it won't be for another couple of months, but I think it's still very interesting. All right, now lastly, I want to talk about Huawei. So this has been kind of a big one in the news recently, not just tech news, but sort of national news, due to security concerns with them, sort of how they do business, their relationship with the Chinese government. I'm not going to go into too much on that. It's just sort of what's going on this week with them. So it's finally actually some good news for them. They've been banned in a lot of countries, obviously, and a lot of countries have been trying to keep them out. They were trying to build 5G in places like England, Australia, America. They were trying to put in 5G networks, but they were sort of barred from doing that. But Russia has approved for them to build out their 5G network, and I think it's one of the big first countries that's allowed them to do that. So this is big news for them, because, not necessarily for your average consumer, but for them, because this has been weeks of bad news with sort of them being barred. They're trying to now sue over sort of how extreme these sort of sanctions are on them. It's causing problems in the China trade war, which is causing stock prices all over the place for a lot of stocks, losing a lot of money, and causing problems for a lot of people. But This is now good news for them, finally, for the first time. And this is a new story, so we'll see how this develops over the coming weeks, how this build-out's going to look, and are other countries now going to sort of allow them in, since Russia's now made a deal with them. We'll see how this goes, and we'll see how China responds to all this. But that pretty much wraps it up for this week's tech news. Please tune in for next week for more of the same, and subscribe for more of my content. Thanks a lot.